having this conversation and with our farm at Interfaith Food Shuttle, and we kept looking around the network saying, who can we learn from? Who can we talk to about what we're doing? We can't be the only food bank that has a farm. And the more I started talking to other CEO leaders around the country, I found out that in the Feeding America network, not only are there farms, community gardens, there are food banks that actually have orchards. Y'all supposed to say, ooh. Someone say it again. There are food banks that actually have orchards. That's going to be so good when we cut the edit the video. However, there wasn't a space for us. There wasn't a place for us to convene. There wasn't a place for us to talk and learn from one another. We would have a session at a 3-day conference or a 2-day conference with our operations or with the financials or the developments or the CEO conferences within the network. We may have a session. Even some of our folks on our agricultural team attended those conferences just for 1 hour and 15-minute session. And that was it. Everyone got all excited to say, wow, you're doing some wonderful things. And then the next session, we're talking about transportation. And so we wanted to find out what can we do. And so we had several conversations with our folks at the national office, and they had an amazing team that is supporting agriculture that are here today. So Feeding America family team, raise your hands. Woo, there you go. And they were like, you know, it's a brilliant idea. We're going to try to get this pulled off. And then everything started happening. Budgets became tight, and we had to make tough decisions. And when it came to adding another conference to the national office budget, they were said, you know, I'm sorry, but we just can't at this time. Was I disappointed? Yeah. But did we give up? Obviously not. And one day, this amazing young lady, her name is Sunny, say, hey, Sunny. Hey, Sunny. Said, hey, I want to come and talk to you because Chiesi wants to do something in the community. And we had an amazing board member that says, I know an organization that does something great in the community. Say, hey, Polly. Hey, Polly. I'm going to point these first people out later. I just didn't want to embarrass them, so we're just going to say hey for right now. And they connected us. This is where the connection starts, the word of mouth connection starts. And we set up a meeting. Sunny came over, Polly came over, and Kimberly, who you heard from this morning, it was her very first day on the job. And about an hour before this meeting, I said, hey Kimberly, some folks from Chiesi are coming over, and I think it'd be great if you sat in on this meeting. And she was like, yeah, of course, absolutely. We started the meeting and we started having conversations, and Sunny was like, well, what can we do? We want to be able to touch people. We want to be able to make a difference, not just locally, but nationally. Chiesi has offices across the country. We have team members that want to get involved, not just give money, but we want to volunteer. We want to be a part of the community. That's what their staff was saying to the leadership. Isn't that a culture of brilliance? That your staff is saying, I live here, and I want to do something here. So we had that conversation. I said, well, Sunny, I got a crazy idea. And here it is. We want to have this convening. She smiled, and I knew it was sold. And she said, you know what? I love it. Can you get something to me, and can we get it pulled together? I said, Kimberly is going to be right back in touch with you with everything you need. And a year and a half later, here we are. Are you not excited about that? Just one example of the power of community, from the building things from the ground up. But let's talk about the elephant in the room, because I know many of you are thinking about this, and those of you from food banks from all over the country here, I'm certain that you are thinking about your team members back home and what they're dealing with and trying to meet this tragic need that we have in our community. With SNAP benefits being cut, we did get a little relief of good news that a portion of those benefits will be released. And then we heard that, oh, it's going to take some time while we figure out how to do that. And we know, because we've been doing this work for a while, even when those benefits get there, number one, they were never enough to last the month. Right. So how far do you think a portion is going to go? And I get calls, we've been getting calls every day, and people reaching out. What does that mean? What does that mean for the food banks? How are you guys doing during this time? So here's what I share. I call myself an artist. Not the one formerly known as Prince, but I'm an artist, and I like to paint pictures. So here's the picture I try to paint, okay? So I want you to imagine, just picture in your mind, your parents and your in-laws. If you're not married, picture your parents and your future in-laws. You got that picture in your head? Yeah. Okay. When you go home tonight, you can only feed one. Which one are you going to feed? Your parents or your in-laws?
My parents.
Of course. They're not going to say, but thank you for being honest. Statistically, will tell me you're going to do your parents, okay? In-laws, even if you love your in-laws, you're in the smaller part of that statistic, okay? So, yeah, in-laws are out the door. I'm going to feed my parents. All right, so picture your parents. Picture your mom, picture your dad. When you go home tonight, you can only feed one.
Mom.
The statistics tell us Mother's Day is a high grossing month. Father's Day, you never even notice it happen. Pastor Jordan, fathers, we lived a long, fruitful life, but they're going to feed mom. They're going to feed mom. So food banks been making those type of decisions, and we understood because the data told us it was okay. And it made sense. But here's the last part of that picture. Picture your children. If you have multiple children, if you have two, you got a young boy on this side and you have a little girl on that side. If you're like Mr. Jermaine Hustler and you got 15, just put 7 on that side and put 8 of them on that side. I'm going to tell you who Jermaine Hustler is in a minute. But he doesn't have 15 kids. But picture those children on both sides of the screen here. Now, if you can only feed one, which one would you choose?
Pop.
Not the size of the picture, regardless of how many children that are up there. You can only feed one child. You have to decide. You have to make that choice. Picture in your mind your own children. When you go home tonight, you have to pick one to feed. Which one is it going to be? How are you going to make that decision?
The youngest.
This is where food banks are. That is what this shutdown is forcing us to do. That is the reality of what we are facing. This is not easy. In over 2 decades of doing this work, I've never really had to make a decision like this. I've always knew what the right thing to do was. Even if it was hard, it was easy because it was the right thing at the end of the day. But how do I make that choice today? I realize it's not my responsibility alone to make that decision. And maybe I don't have to. Maybe I can do something else. Did my grandparents have to make that decision? No, my grandmother had 9, as they would say, 9 head of children. 9 head of children. And they never had to make that choice.
Correct.
And then on top of that, her and my grandparents, my grandfather, all 9 of their kids were like out of the house. You would think life got better and easy for them. But like many of the families something happened to one of their children's spouse. 36 years old, one of their sons lost his wife. And because he was young and the tragic loss, and he had 4 children, he ended up losing his job because he couldn't focus. And my grandparents had 4 more mouths to feed. But yet, they never had to make a choice. So I started thinking and reflecting on that. Like, why didn't they have to make a choice? They knew something. They knew something very strategic. They knew of a place called the Food Trust, so they could get some support. But they were farmers. And they were like, hey, well, I got these 4 kids, I guess I can farm a little longer. But 3 of those kids were girls, and it was 1 little boy. I was like, well, we could still farm a little longer with that 1 kid. And that was me. Growing up on the farm, learning how to drive a tractor before I can drive a car. And it's that lived experience that brought us to today. Because if my grandparents could figure this out, there's something I can do, there's something I can learn from that I can bring and make it, build it into a strategy where I don't have to make that choice. So here's what I would like for you to do. As we start this conference, I want you to remember this. Begin with the end in mind. I'm going to say it one more time. Begin with the end in mind. Paint that picture. What are you looking for out of this conference? What is that end result? Here's the end result that I see. I see a community that is thriving, taking care of themselves. They're feeding themselves. They're growing food for themselves. I see them watching the news and hearing about the cuts and hearing about the tragedies that are happening and the tough decisions that other people have to make. And they're sitting around the tables saying, I'm going to pray for that community. I'm going to pray that community find a way to do what we have done in this community. Because I don't have to choose which child I'm going to feed. I can take all of my children out to my backyard and we can harvest dinner together. I can take my children with me to church on Sunday morning, and after service, we can walk out to the back, to the garden, and get our Sunday dinner. We don't have to choose which child would eat. That's what I'm picturing. That's the end. That is the end result in what we want. We want a community that doesn't feel the burden of what happens in DC. We want a community that is resilient, that they're not depending upon failed systems because they have created their own. I've seen it, and we're going to show it to you. In a few moments, we're going to show it to you. So how do we do it? How did we do that? Well, that same lived experience that I told you about, we built it into a strategy. And guess what? John, I know you said that Chiesi USA doesn't necessarily have any connection here. Aside from community, that is the biggest part. Because your company, it really doesn't matter what the industry is. It's a part of this community. And the one thing we did, and you all have seen these templates, and that they've always put the neighbor and the client in the center. And they're like, well, this is transportation can help here. This is food service can help here. And the person is in the middle just receiving all of this. I thought back to my grandparents. You say, well, my grandparents wasn't too big on handouts. They were wonderful when it came to hand-ups. And this is what they did. They grew their crop. Other families in the neighborhood came and helped harvest. And at the end of the day, every family took what they need for their family. Yes. My grandparents took the rest of the crop to the market. And now the neighbor's crop came in. And everyone in the community went to my neighbor's house and we harvested their crops. At the end of the day, everyone got what they needed. And then my grandfather went and grew tobacco. But that was just 1 year. However, do you see what happened there? Yes. That's a strategy. And so in this convening, I wanted us to be able to learn and teach you how we were able to do that. And so we came up with a system. And the first thing was, number one, we listen. We want to hear what our neighbors have to say. The data told us that's a food desert. The data says, here's the median income. This is a impoverished community. However, when you talk to them and you say, hey, this community tell me you're in a food desert. A food what? A food desert, which means you don't have a grocery store around here. Oh no, we've never had a grocery store around here. But you need to have a grocery store. That's what the data tells us in order for this to be a thriving community. No, we don't. We live in a food oasis. We're taking care of ourselves. That's the information that doesn't show up in the data. So we listen. Together we identify what are the barriers to your community. What's preventing you from being able to do this? And then we empower. Hey, you got a solution? Let's fuel it. Let's put it into action. Let's make it work. This is what you feel the solution is? Okay, let's walk together. And that's the part where we act on that decision that we've made together. And then we can step back and say, wow, that's beautiful. Because our hands aren't on it anymore, but it's sustaining. That's our approach. That's the strategy. So I want you to remember what your end result is. Your purpose for being here. What are you looking? Have that picture in your head. And over the next few days, we're going to provide you the paint. We're going to provide you all of the colors for you to fill in that picture. And you have a room full of other artists who can contribute to your portrait. So don't feel you have to paint this painting by yourself. So with that said, welcome to our first annual Growing Stronger Communities Agricultural Conference.